Hello, everybody. We are here today to preview the rematch in the SEC championship game, Texas versus Georgia, round 2. Last one came in, I believe, October, week 8. Texas lost that game 30-15. They were also favorites in that game. They are favorites in this game as well, 2.5 points here. In my opinion, some of the keys to the game, and we'll jump right into it. Texas has to run the ball better in this game. The numbers, obviously, Texas only rushed for 29 yards in that game. A lot of that does have to do because college, for whatever reasons, decides to take away your sack yardage for your rushing numbers. Texas got sacked in that game 6 or 7 times. Quinn Ewers, I believe, took 5 or 6 of those. Arch Manning took 1. And Quinn Ewers, to me, has to be better in the pocket in this game. He was terrible in the pocket versus the first game with Georgia. Did not move well. He ran out of clean pockets. He held onto the ball too long, and then he didn't even move side to side. As soon as he saw something, he just flat out ran out of the pocket when it was clean or there was room to move up. He has to be better in that way in this game. With my co-host Gerald yesterday on the Texas show, we talked about how he has gotten better since that Georgia game of doing that. It's been progressively slower, but he has been doing it better. And overall, I think this offensive line has played better as well. We're starting to get a push in the run game. Trey Wisner had a career day versus Kentucky with over 150 yards. Then he has over 180 yards versus a really good front four from Texas A&M. And that has a lot to do because Trey Wisner is the most consistent back on this team, but also because this offensive line took it to another level after the bye week. They've done way better versus Florida, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. Now, this is a totally different challenge, a way tougher challenge in Georgia if they do play more consistently. And I think that's another key to the game for both of these teams is to play consistently. We have not seen that this year from either team, honestly. It's been iffy on both sides for both teams. I do think the one side of the ball that is the most consistent for both of these teams. Like if you just went unit by unit, whoever has the best side of the ball, I think Texas's defense right now is the most consistent out of the 4 units. That's what I believe. And then from there, you can have your choice of whether the next unit's going to be Georgia's defense, Georgia's offense, Texas offense, whatever way you want to slice it. I think you can dissect it, but I think Texas's defense is the most consistent unit on the field. I think they are the best unit actually as a whole in the SEC, so it's going to be interesting. Now, do I expect Carson Beck to throw 3 interceptions in this game like he did in that game? No, he was kind of going through a rough patch there, and it really hurt him. We'll see what happens in this game. Do I expect Quinn Ewers to play as bad in that game as he did, or in this game as he did in that game? He's been progressively getting a little bit better, slightly better throughout the season since that game. The running game has been better as well. So it's going to be very interesting what type of Quinn Ewers shows up in this game. In my opinion, I think you're going to get something between A&M first half and Michigan, which means I think it'll be good. I don't think it'll be great. And we'll have to see what happens there. But that's my opinion on the keys to the game. I think the most important thing is Texas has to establish the run and push the ball north and south and not east and west. They got caught up and tried to do that last time, and that does not work versus Georgia, guys. That does not work at all. You have to be able to hit them north and south. They were playing on their toes the whole night. They were attacking downhill. If Texas wants to play that game east and west again, they will get beat. You have to hit them up inside with the running game, and you have to soften them up with play action, especially deep passes down the field. Tyler, what is your opinion on this game?
Yeah, and you made a lot of really good points. I think the biggest, obviously, I'd agree with you, is the line of scrimmage. Who's going to win majority of the battles? Last time, I would say it was probably 70-30. 70% of the time, Georgia was able to establish that line of scrimmage versus Texas on the 30% of the side. And then the interceptions and just inconsistency with the quarterbacks. Both quarterbacks played terrible in this game. And when we first played each other, let's just get that out of the way. You kind of already brought that up. Quinn Ewers, he averaged 4 yards a pass. I think he averaged something like 6 or 7 yards of completion, something like that. Had like a 20.3 QBR, the lowest of the season. And I do believe it's up there in his career for one of the worst games he's ever had. Versus Carson Beck, who had 3 terrible interceptions, 3 forced passes, could have had more, if we're being honest here. So both quarterbacks played really, really bad in that game. And I'm expecting a completely different game from both these teams on Saturday. But yeah, number 2 would definitely be quarterback play. And then number three, which secondary is going to step it up? Texas has by far the best secondary, I think, in the country. You could throw in Ohio State. That's pretty much Notre Dame. Notre Dame's probably the most underrated. Notre Dame's, in my opinion, a little bit better than Ohio State's. But Texas for sure has a top 3 DB core in college football. Made a lot of plays thus far this season. That defensive line is ridiculous. And the run game's starting to come for Texas. Now, me and you talked about the rush game about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Where was it? Well, here it is now with Wisner specifically, who's had an amazing 3 or 4 games stretch. And coaching overall, there's something weird going on with Texas's offense. Same with Georgia's defense. Georgia really struggles in the quarterback run game specifically. You saw that against Haynes King. We've seen that with Jalen Milroe. Even Jackson Dart, he was able to get some. Actually, I think he had 70 yards rushing against Georgia. Quarterback run game has killed Georgia. Texas, on the other hand, it's these random. They feel like flukes, but they happen every week. Plays in which Quinn Ewers kind of forces the football that gets kind of deflected. So it's kind of on his fault, but kind of not, but it's still intercepted. We saw that with Will Lee. Kentucky had a deflected pick 6. Vanderbilt was able to get 2 deflected interceptions. These weird stretches, and I'm going to blame it on the play calling. I think Texas should have just never passed the ball against Texas A&M. I'm being dead serious. Even getting down to the red zone, they should have just ran the ball. They were getting about 7-8 yards per carry against the Aggies. Keep running the football. I know once you get down thin into the red zone, it gets a little bit harder, but I don't care. 3 is better than 0, and there was about a 10-point swing on that interception return to the house. So play calling is going to be huge, especially offensively in this game. Mike Bobo versus mainly Steve Sarkisian's offensive set. But overall, this is going to be a much better game than what we saw in the first matchup.
Yeah, I agree. And something crazy that I heard today on another podcast, the negative play rate, which the amount of plays, like let's say you have 10 plays, if you have a 30% negative play rate, 3 of those were negative plays. Negative play rate in this game was 44% for Texas, and it was 45% for Georgia. So Georgia was actually worse on offense than Texas. The thing that happened is Texas did not capitalize on the Georgia opportunities, and when Texas turned it over, they turned it over on their side of the field, whereas Georgia turned it over deep in Texas territory. So just a really bad offensive showing by both these teams, and I do believe both these teams will play better offensively. I think it's going to honestly come down to the Georgia defense. What Georgia defense shows up? Does the Georgia defense that showed up every other week other than the Texas week show up, or does that defense show up? Because if that defense shows up, I think they win this football game. If it doesn't, I think they're going to lose the game. It's going to be very interesting because both these teams, other than the Texas defense, the 3 out of the other 4 units are just super inconsistent, and you have no idea which one shows up this week. I'm confident Texas defense will show up. I'm not confident in anything else showing up for either one of these teams. I think it could come down to a special teams mistake as well for Texas, because we've seen that all year, whether it's a shank punt or a block punt this week with Michael Kern and Texas A&M. You try to keep them in the game, and Texas seems to do that. Like, they should have run away with this game. That should have been like a 31-0 football game. They completely manhandled A&M, and it was only 17-7. So Texas, for whatever reason, has done that this year, where they dominate teams statistically, but then on the scoreboard, you look up, you're like, wow, it's only like a 10-point game. Why is that? They did that versus Vanderbilt. They did that versus Kentucky. They did that versus Texas A&M. Really, the only game that was close, that deserved to be close, was Arkansas. That was really a slugfest, but every other game has just been, why is this game closer than it should have been? So it's going to be interesting. Tyler, I'll let you kick this off first. What is your prediction for this game?
Well, I hope, and my biggest prediction is it's a better game than what it was last time. I mean, the last time these two teams played, I know we've kind of already talked about it, it was bad football. It was bad football on both sides, really both offenses, not defenses, but both offenses played horrific. Debatably the worst for the season for both teams. Now, Georgia played terrible against Ole Miss for 4 quarters. So I'd give that a little bit of a pass there. But I expect this game to be very, very close. Both teams battling this one out. Texas is a newcomer to the SEC. Wouldn't it be kind of crazy that they'd win it year 1? I know a lot of people pointing at Texas's schedule, but come on, Texas is a legitimate top 5 team. They deserve to be number 2 in the nation. And I know we talked about Texas's defense showing up, but I do trust Carson Beck. I do believe Carson Beck, big game Beck, is going to be back in Atlanta on Saturday. I do expect the Dogs to move the football a little bit better than what they did against Texas the first time. And I don't think Georgia's pass rush is going to be as effective as it was in the first matchup. But then again, Georgia had those 3 terrible interceptions. Texas had 2 pretty bad turnovers with the fumble on Arch Manning. And speaking of Arch Manning, I kind of hope to see him in this game, maybe just for quarterback runs, or maybe let him throw some passes in this game. Because like I said, Georgia has been gashed all year long in the quarterback run game. For whatever reason, Georgia really just cannot stop the quarterback run. They can't even limit it. Haynes King, I think he finished with 90 yards on Georgia. I get it, he had 25 attempts. But he at one point in time in the game, he was at 15 attempts for 70-something yards and a touchdown. So, but we've already seen Jackson Dart. Jalen Milroe had over 100 yards rushing. So I do expect Arch Manning to have some type of effect on this game. But in the end, I'm going to go with Carson Beck and my Georgia Bulldogs. I didn't go with him the first time because it was a road game. I get it. This is not a home game really for Georgia. I do expect a lot of Texas fans to be in Atlanta, but I do think it's going to be like a 60-40, 60% Georgia fans, 40% Texas fans, or maybe even 65-35. But I really do believe Georgia needs this game a little bit more than Texas. And I trust Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo specifically. He's been getting a bad rep at UGA thus far this season. I'm hoping for a little bit less drops, especially with Arian Smith. He has 8 on the season, 7 of which came in some of the key, well, I wouldn't say key moments, but big-time moments for Georgia against Texas, against Ole Miss, even last week against Georgia Tech. So, some of those bigger moments, he hasn't stepped up. But I do think Georgia's going to come away with this win. This is a game I think Georgia needs a little bit more than Texas. I know both teams want to get that double bye. Georgia has been more battle-tested all year. I'm going to trust my coach, Kirby Smart, to get it done against Steve Sarkisian, 27-24 by a field goal in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game, and it is going to be interesting how they utilize Arch Manning. I didn't even expect Arch Manning to get like special packages versus Texas A&M. So I think that was pretty cool that Steve Sarkisian threw that wrinkle in, because honestly, I thought he was just going to be 100% committed to Quinn no matter what, never see Arch Manning this year. But I think that was actually smart to throw him in there. And I do think he'll throw a pass. I think he's just sort of setting things up, because I don't even think A&M knew he was going to play in that game at all. I think they were kind of surprised the first time he took the field, and that's why he was so open on that run. But it's going to be interesting with that. I think Kelvin Banks maybe not playing in this game will be interesting, even though Trevor Gooseby did play like a phenomenal game. I was shocked by that. He was the 11th highest rated offensive lineman in all of Pro Football Focus for college football last week, which is crazy to come in and do that on the road in your first real action. And he's a massive human being. I trust him, but I don't know if I trust him enough to go up to a Michael Williams, Jalen Walker, and those guys. But if Kelvin Banks can't give it a go, then I guess that's where we're going to have to go with. It would not shock me if we slide protection over there, if we put an extra offensive lineman in at some points in this game, try to get big and run at Georgia a little bit. It's going to be very interesting. I don't know. I'm not confident either way in this game. I'm going to take Texas to win it 26-20. I think it's super close. I think it's within a touchdown either way. I agree with Tyler. I don't think this is going to be a blowout game. I think this honestly is going to be completely different from the last time they played, because I think that was Texas' first real test. Like, we were playing in the Little League, and then we went up to Georgia, and then that was our first real test. Then we played some other good, like, defensive teams. Like, you can say what you want about Kentucky. Up until last week, they were a pretty good defensive team. Texas A&M has a good defense. So it's going to be interesting how we do versus Georgia. And I don't know what Georgia shows up. I don't know whether it's, like I said, it's that day versus Texas, the second half versus Tennessee, Georgia, or we're getting everything every other week, Georgia. If we're getting every other week, Georgia, they're pretty mortal, and I think Texas can handle them. But I'm going to go Texas here 26-20. Can you guys do us a favor? Please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. We have a live show every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so check that out as well. It really helps out. Thank you guys for being here, and we'll catch you on the other side.